You're walking in the woods at dusk. You hear a sharp crackle in the underbrush just off the path. Do you stop? Do you calmly analyze the sound waves, consider the wind patterns, the likelihood of a falling branch? Or does a jolt of adrenaline hit you as your mind instantly, almost involuntarily, leaps to a conclusion? Something is in there. Not just something, but someone. Who is watching you. You're looking up at the clouds drifting across the summer sky, and you see it. Not just a random formation of water vapor condensed around dust particles, but a face, an animal, a hand reaching out. You hear a strange, unfamiliar creak in your house in the dead of night. Your logical brain might calmly suggest the house is just settling as the temperature changes. But your gut instinct, that primal feeling in your chest, screams, someone or something is here. This is the human condition. We are relentless, obsessive, and perhaps incurable pattern seekers. More than that, we seem to be hardwired to see agency, intention, mind, and purpose all around us, often projecting these qualities onto things that may possess none of them. And in a world that is, in many ways, increasingly secular, where science has provided powerful, naturalistic explanations for the weather, for the origins of life through evolution, and for the vast mechanics of the cosmos, one phenomenon persists with incredible, almost baffling stubbornness across nearly all human cultures and throughout history: religious belief. Why, in an age of reason, astrophysics, neuroscience, and evolutionary biology, do the vast majority of human beings on this planet, around 84% according to recent studies, still believe in some form of invisible, supernatural agent or force? Is it just a leftover cultural habit passed down through generations like language or cuisine? Is it merely a comforting psychological crutch, a story we tell ourselves to cope with the existential terror of death and meaninglessness? Or is it something deeper, something woven into the very fabric of our minds? What if the human brain itself, its fundamental architecture, its evolutionary quirks, its default settings, has been primed for belief? What if our minds aren't truly blank slates waiting for culture to write upon them, but are, in fact, inherently predisposed, perhaps even subtly designed, to find, perceive, and accept the reality of God or gods? What if there really is something like a God-shaped hole in the human heart, as the philosopher Blaise Pascal famously suggested? Today, we are exploring one of the most fascinating, challenging, and rapidly developing fields of modern science: the cognitive science of religion, CSR. We are diving deep into the cognitive toolkit that seems to make humans naturally receptive to religious ideas. We are looking for the scientific evidence for or against that elusive God-shaped hole, and asking a profound, potentially uncomfortable question: is our seemingly innate human tendency towards belief in God a product of divine design, a signal from a creator? Or is it just an interesting, and perhaps inevitable, evolutionary bug in our complex cognitive software? Before we dive into the specific cognitive tools, it is absolutely crucial that we understand what this field of science, the cognitive science of religion, or CSREs, and perhaps more importantly, what it is not. CSR is not a debate about whether God, or gods, or spirits actually exist in external reality. It is not theology. It is not philosophy, though it has profound philosophical implications. It cannot, by its very nature, as an empirical science studying the human mind, prove or disprove the existence of any deity or supernatural reality outside of that mind. Science deals with the natural, observable world. Questions of the supernatural are generally outside its empirical toolkit. Instead, CSR is a vibrant and multidisciplinary field, drawing heavily on cognitive psychology, evolutionary biology, anthropology, and increasingly, neuroscience. It asks a different, and perhaps more scientifically tractable, question: why is religious belief and behavior so remarkably common, found in virtually all human societies throughout history, so seemingly natural, so incredibly persistent, surviving, and often thriving despite scientific advances and organized secularization efforts, and often so easy or intuitive for human minds across vastly different cultures to accept, remember, and transmit? The central, and for some, highly controversial, answer proposed by many leading CSR scholars is this: our brains are likely not specifically or directly wired for God with a dedicated religion module that evolved for that purpose. Rather, our widespread belief in God is largely an unintended byproduct, fascinating, powerful, and perhaps even occasionally adaptive side effect, a set of everyday, ordinary, non-religious, cognitive tools or biases that evolved for entirely different, more mundane survival purposes. We use these underlying tools constantly, automatically, and subconsciously, just to navigate our complex social relationships, make quick decisions under uncertainty, and make sense of our physical environment. Religion, in this prevailing byproduct view, didn't need a special, dedicated neurological structure to evolve. It simply found a perfect cognitive niche within our existing mental architecture. Religious concepts fit our brain's default settings, our intuitive ways of thinking, incredibly well, making them easy to learn, remember, and believe. So, what are these fundamental cognitive tools that seem to make humans such natural believers? Let's break down 3 of the most important and well-studied ones. The first one is the reason you jumped when you heard that noise in the woods. This first tool has a delightfully nerdy and descriptive name coined by CSR pioneer Justin Barrett, the Hyperactive Agency Detection Device, or HADD. That's a very fancy academic label for a very simple, very intuitive, and very primal concept. Our brains are hardwired to default towards assuming that intent or agency, who with a mind, rather than an impersonal what or just random chance, is behind any ambiguous, unexplained, or potentially significant event. We are agent detectors perpetually dialed up to high, operating on a better safe than sorry principle. Think about our evolutionary ancestors living on the African savanna millions of years ago. A dangerous environment teeming with hidden predators. Imagine 2 early hominids foraging near some tall grass. Suddenly, they both hear a distinct rustle in the grass just ahead. Hominid A, the cool-headed skeptic, pauses and thinks, interesting auditory event. Based on wind patterns and the typical fauna, it's most likely just the wind blowing through the grass, or perhaps a small, harmless rodent. Hominid B, the jumpy believer, doesn't engage in careful analysis. Their mind instantly screams, lion, run. Now, statistically, 99 times out of 100, Hominid A, the skeptic, is absolutely correct. It was just the wind or a mouse. But that crucial 1 time out of 100, when it is a hungry lion, Hominid A becomes part of the fossil record. Hominid B, the paranoid believer who wasted energy running away unnecessarily 99 times, survives to pass on their hyperactive, agency-detecting genes. We are, the theory goes, the evolutionary descendants of Hominid B. Natural selection has strongly favored brains that make rapid, automatic assumptions of agency in situations of uncertainty, especially when potential threats might be involved. This means our brains are biased towards making what psychologists call a type 1 error, a false positive when it comes to detecting agents. We see agents' minds, intentions, where there might be none, because, from a survival perspective, over millennia, it's far less costly in the long run to mistakenly assume agency and be wrong than it is to mistakenly assume no agency and be wrong. Our brains, in this crucial domain of detecting other minds or actors, are not primarily programmed for accuracy in a detached, scientific sense. They are programmed for survival in a potentially hostile world. We are spring-loaded to see intention behind ambiguity. So what does this ancient predator detection system have to do with believing in God or spirits? According to CSR scholars, everything. It provides the foundational cognitive bias, the automatic tendency to populate the world with unseen agents. This same hyperactive agency detection is what makes us instinctively look at a sudden bolt of lightning striking a nearby tree and think, not what complex atmospheric conditions and electrical potential differences caused that discharge, but who, through that, or what powerful being caused that, or even what did I do to anger the sky. It's what makes early agricultural societies utterly dependent on unpredictable weather. Look at a devastating drought or a failed harvest and ask, not what were the long-term climatic patterns, but who did we fail to appease? What spirit did we offend? It's what makes us feel that a sudden gust of wind rattling the windows in an otherwise silent room, or a floorboard creaking upstairs when we know we're home alone, is not just a random physical event, but potentially a presence, an agent, a who. Our HADD is constantly firing, automatically and often subconsciously, detecting potential agents all around us, especially in situations that are unexpected, unexplained, or emotionally significant. This fundamental cognitive tool likely evolved primarily for spotting predators and was just as importantly for navigating complex social interactions, rapidly guessing the intentions of other humans, provides the fertile soil, the cognitive predisposition for believing in all sorts of invisible agents that interact with the world, nature spirits, ghosts of the dead, ancestral spirits, local deities, demons, fairies, and, ultimately, powerful, creator gods, or the one God. But simply detecting an agent isn't enough to build a complex religious system. Our brains immediately take the next crucial step, deploying another fundamental cognitive tool, theory of mind, TOM. Theory of mind is our innate and highly developed ability, found most strongly in humans, to understand that other beings have minds, that they possess internal mental states like intentions, beliefs, knowledge, desires, emotions, and perspectives that are different from our own and that drive their behavior. It's the cognitive machinery that allows us to empathize. She's crying, she must be sad, even though I feel happy. Cooperate towards shared goals. He wants the same thing I do. We can work together. Predict others' actions. If she believes X, she will likely do Y. Deceive. I need to make him think I don't know the secret. Tell complex stories involving character motivations, and build the intricate social relationships and large-scale societies that define our species. It's fundamental to being human. And just like HADD, we instinctively over-apply it. We don't just use theory of mind on other humans. We naturally and often automatically project it onto almost everything that seems to act with some kind of purpose or complexity. This pervasive tendency is called anthropomorphism. We talk to our pets as if they understand our complex anxieties about our job performance or appreciate our taste in music. We yell at our malfunctioning laptop or our car that won't start, as if it's intentionally trying to frustrate us or has a malevolent will of its own. We look at a particularly dark and turbulent storm cloud and say the sky looks angry. We read the stock market report and hear that investors are feeling nervous today. We even do it with simple geometric shapes moving on a screen. If they move in goal-directed ways, we instantly ascribe intentions to them. So, when our HUD detects an invisible agent behind a natural event, the river seems alive today and caused this flood. Something powerful and unseen made the volcano erupt. Our highly social theory of mind immediately kicks in and asks the next logical, social questions. What does it want? What are its intentions? What does it know? Does it know I'm here? What does it feel? Is it angry, pleased, indifferent? How can I interact with it to achieve a desired outcome, like stopping the flood or ensuring a good harvest? This projection of human-like minds onto the invisible agents detected by HADD is, CSR scholars argue, the cognitive origin of most religious practices and beliefs about divine characteristics. It's why gods and spirits are so often conceived of as having beliefs, desires, memories, and intentions, much like superpowered humans. It's the origin of prayer communicating our desires to these minds. Ritual acting in ways we believe these minds want us to act. Sacrifice offering something these minds might value to appease them or gain favor. Divination trying to figure out what these minds know or intend. And the moral dimension of religion, understanding and following the rules these minds supposedly decree. We are profoundly social creatures who have populated our entire cosmos with invisible, social beings possessing minds somewhat like our own. And we are hardwired to try and figure out what those beings think and want, and how to manage those crucial relationships, often using the exact same social strategies: appeasement, reciprocity, praise, petition, forming alliances that we evolved to use with other humans in our social groups. There is a third, powerful, and seemingly near-universal cognitive bias that forms the foundation for nearly all religious belief. Concerning life after death, the soul, and the existence of non-physical beings, intuitive mind-body dualism. Ask yourself this simple question, using your natural, everyday language and intuition. Are you your physical body, or do you have a physical body? For the vast majority of people across cultures and throughout history, and even for many modern people who intellectually reject dualism, the intuitive answer, the way we feel and talk about ourselves, strongly leans towards the second option. We instinctively speak and often feel as if our self, our mind, our consciousness, our personality, our soul, our irreducible me-ness is a conceptually distinct thing or entity that inhabits, possesses, or uses our physical body. We say, I need to drag my body out of bed, as if I am the reluctant driver and the body is the sluggish vehicle. We easily imagine scenarios of switching bodies in science fiction like Freaky Friday, or uploading our consciousness to a computer, implying the mind is separable software from the bodily hardware. We talk naturally about out-of-body experiences or feeling disconnected from our physical form. Cognitive scientists who study child development have found compelling evidence that even very young children seem to naturally think in dualistic terms, well before they receive explicit religious instruction. They readily accept stories where minds leave bodies, where invisible friends have thoughts, or where inanimate objects like toys have feelings and intentions. This suggests that dualism, this intuitive separation of the mental and the physical, is not primarily something we are painstakingly taught by religion or philosophy later in life, but is rather an intuitive, perhaps even innate, default setting for the human brain. It likely emerges naturally from our distinct first-person experiences of our own internal mental states, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, which feel immaterial, versus our third-person observations of physical objects and bodies, which seem purely material. We directly experience our own consciousness as something qualitatively different from our observable flesh and bone. And the implications of this intuitive dualism for the origins and persistence of religious belief are profound and far-reaching. If the mind feels inherently separate from, and perhaps superior to, the physical body, it is a very, very small cognitive leap to believe that the mind or soul or spirit can survive the death of the physical body. If I am not fundamentally identical with my perishable physical stuff, then why should I necessarily cease to exist just because my physical stuff? Then why should I necessarily cease to exist just because my physical stuff ceases to function? This powerful gut feeling, this intuition that I am more than just my physical brain and body, is argued by CSR scholars to be the universal cognitive foundation for virtually all belief in an afterlife. It's the cognitive origin of belief in ghosts, in ancestral spirits that continue to exist and interact with the living, in reincarnation, and in the soul's eventual journey to a heaven, hell, underworld, purgatory, or some other post-mortem realm. Belief in some form of post-death survival is not initially a complex theological doctrine we have to be carefully taught. It's a common-sense intuition that our cognitive architecture provides us with almost automatically. We actually have to be actively taught the counterintuitive scientific worldview of physicalism or materialism, the idea that consciousness is entirely and solely an emergent property of the physical brain and ceases utterly and completely when the brain dies. So, let's put all these cognitive pieces together. The cognitive science of religion suggests that we humans come into the world equipped with a brain that is, by default, 1. Hyperactive at detecting agency and intention behind ambiguous or significant events, had 2. Hardwired to attribute human-like minds, beliefs, desires, and intentions to those detected agents, both visible and invisible theory of mind, anthropomorphism. 3. Intuitively feels that our own minds or souls are separate from our physical bodies and can potentially exist independently, perhaps even surviving death, dualism. These fundamental cognitive tools likely evolved for entirely non-religious survival and social purposes. Working in concert, create what CSR scholars often call a cognitive niche, a perfect, receptive, psychological space, a set of default settings in our minds that religious concepts just so happen to fit into incredibly well. Like a key fitting a lock. Religious concepts like invisible agents with minds who care about our behavior and souls that survive death don't typically need to fight against our core cognitive biases. They often flow naturally with them, piggybacking easily onto these pre-existing mental pathways. This is the essence of the byproduct theory in CSR. Religion, in this view, is largely an emergent phenomenon. An accidental but powerful and culturally significant consequence of having a big, complex, social, pattern-seeking brain that evolved primarily for other, more mundane purposes like finding food, avoiding predators, attracting mates, and navigating intricate social hierarchies. We don't necessarily have to learn to be religious from scratch. In a sense, our brain's default settings make us naturally susceptible to religious ideas. We often have to be actively taught how not to be religious, how to suppress or override these powerful intuitions in favor of more skeptical, abstract, or empirically grounded scientific explanations for the world. This model also helps explain why certain kinds of religious ideas are so incredibly sticky, memorable, and transmissible across cultures, contributing to the astonishing success and persistence of religions throughout human history. CSR scholars like Pascal Boyer have highlighted the cognitive advantages of minimally counterintuitive concepts, MIC. These are concepts that are mostly normal and fit our intuitive understanding of the world, our folk physics, folk biology, folk psychology, for example. Solid objects can't pass through each other. Animals reproduce after their own kind. People act based on beliefs and desires, but have one or two key, attention-grabbing violations of those intuitive expectations. Think of common religious concepts like a bush that talks, mostly normal object, bush, violates intuitive biology, plants don't talk. A man who walks on water or lives forever, mostly normal agent, man, violates intuitive physics, gravity or biology, mortality. A spirit or God that is invisible but has thoughts, desires, memories, and perceptions, mostly normal mind, violates intuitive physics. Biology, lacks a body, can pass through walls, potentially knows things without seeing them. Our brains, research suggests, are uniquely adapted to notice, remember, and retell these kinds of minimally surprising, intriguing stories and concepts. They are more memorable and attention-grabbing than purely intuitive concepts. A man walks on the ground and then eventually dies, boring, and generally more plausible and easier to process and reason about than maximally counterintuitive or bizarre concepts. This cognitive sweet spot of minimal counterintuitiveness helps explain why certain types of religious narratives, myths, and descriptions of supernatural agents, often possessing minds much like ours but lacking bodies, or having slightly altered physical properties like invisibility or immortality, spread so successfully via cultural transmission and become stable features of human cultures around the globe. So, CSR provides a powerful, compelling, and purely naturalistic explanation, grounded in well-established principles of cognitive psychology and evolutionary theory, for why religion, in its myriad forms, is such a fundamental, enduring, and seemingly natural part of the human experience across virtually all cultures and throughout history. Even in the face of scientific progress and secularization. And this brings us, inevitably and crucially, to the final and most intensely debated philosophical question arising from this science. The question that science itself, by its very nature, cannot definitively answer. What does all of this cognitive and evolutionary explanation mean? If science can provide a plausible, evidence-based, naturalistic account for the mechanisms of why human brains so readily produce, accept, remember, and transmit religious beliefs, what does that scientific explanation imply about the truth, the validity, or the ultimate source of those beliefs? Does explaining the how negate the who or the what? This is where the philosophical battle lines are drawn, and where the exact same scientific data can be interpreted in radically different, often diametrically opposed, ways depending on one's prior metaphysical assumptions. On one side of the debate, a skeptic, an atheist, or a philosophical naturalist perhaps, someone following the line of thought of influential cognitive scientists like Daniel Dennett, or popular science communicators like Richard Dawkins, would look at this accumulating evidence from CSR and likely conclude, with considerable confidence, case closed. This is the explanation. From this perspective, God and widespread religious belief are essentially cognitive illusions. They are sophisticated but ultimately unintended byproducts, or spectrals, of mental modules that evolved for entirely different, purely natural survival and social purposes, spotting predators, navigating social groups, etc. Religion is a persistent artifact, perhaps even a virus of the mind, propagated by cultural transmission because it fits so well with our cognitive biases. We are simply seeing meaningful patterns in random noise, projecting human-like agency onto impersonal forces, mistaking our powerful intuitive feelings for objective reality. We are, in effect, seeing faces in the clouds, and we've built complex theological systems, elaborate rituals, powerful institutions, and entire civilizations around these projections. The God-shaped hole is just an interesting, perhaps even occasionally useful, for example, for group cohesion, ghost in our evolutionary machine. Belief is simply what our brains naturally do, not necessarily a reflection of what is actually true about external reality. CSR, in this view, effectively explains God away. But on the other side of the debate, a believer, a theologian, or a philosophically inclined theist, perhaps someone following the line of thought of prominent Christian philosophers like Alvin Plantinga or William Lane Craig, or thinkers from other faith traditions, would look at the exact same scientific evidence emerging from CSR and come to the diametrically opposite philosophical conclusion. They might say, of course, this is the blueprint. This makes perfect sense. This is precisely what we would expect if a loving, rational God did exist and genuinely wanted to be known by and have a relationship with his human creation. From this perspective, God, as the intelligent designer of human beings, wouldn't create us as blind, deaf, atheistic robots, utterly incapable of perceiving him or responding to him in the natural world. Instead, he would, as part of his wise design for humanity, build into our very cognitive architecture the necessary faculties, the intuitive default settings, the inherent receptivity required to be able to perceive his agency in the world, to recognize him as a mind with intentions, to conceive of our own spiritual nature, and ultimately to form a relationship with him. In this theistic interpretation, the had isn't just seeing predators in the grass. It's the antenna or cognitive faculty God gave us, what Plantinga might call part of a basic, properly functioning cognitive toolkit, or what John Calvin called the sensus divinitatis, an innate sense of the divine to naturally perceive his action and presence in the beauty, order, and contingency of the universe. The theory of mind isn't just for socializing with other humans. It's the crucial cognitive tool that allows us to conceive of and potentially have a meaningful relationship with a personal God who also possesses attributes of mind, knowledge, intention, love, will. Intuitive dualism isn't just a cognitive quirk or illusion. It's a reflection, however imperfectly grasped by our intuition, of the actual reality that we do possess souls or minds that are distinct from, though connected to, our physical bodies and are potentially destined for an existence beyond physical death. The God-shaped hole, from this perspective, is not a bug in the software. It's the target intentionally placed on the motherboard by the divine designer, drawing us towards him. CSR, therefore, isn't explaining God away at all. It's simply discovering and describing the natural cognitive mechanisms God himself designed and used to make belief in him possible, intuitive and widespread among humankind. The science describes the intricate how of beliefs, mechanics, but the believer still points to God as the ultimate why behind those mechanics. So, the fascinating science of why we believe doesn't, and likely cannot, definitively settle the ultimate philosophical and existential question of whether those widely held beliefs actually correspond to reality. Both the thoughtful skeptic and the thoughtful believer can look at the same empirical data emerging from CSR and find, perhaps unsurprisingly, that it fits comfortably and even provides support for their existing metaphysical worldview. And that is the profound question I leave for you today. What do you make of this fascinating science and its equally fascinating, competing philosophical interpretations? Does this cognitive and evolutionary explanation of belief, this uncovering of the mental machinery that seems to make us natural believers, strengthen or weaken the plausibility or authority of religious belief in your eyes? Is this apparent God-shaped whole, this seemingly innate human predisposition towards belief in unseen agents, minds beyond bodies, and life after death, compelling evidence for a divine blueprint, intentionally woven into our cognitive fabric by a creator who desires to be found and known? Or is it, rather, a compelling case for belief as a cognitive illusion, a beautiful, persistent, and perhaps even evolutionarily useful ghost generated by the complex, survival-oriented machinery of our evolved brains? Is it simply an inevitable byproduct of highly adaptive mental tools like agency detection, social intelligence, and intuitive dualism that now fills our world with unseen agents and satisfies our existential longings? Where do you land in this ultimate debate between blueprint and illusion? Let me know your thoughts, respectfully and thoughtfully, in the comments below. This intersection of science, evolution, psychology, and the enduring human quest for meaning is one of the most profound and important areas of inquiry we can engage with. If you found this deep dive into the science of our beliefs challenging and thought-provoking, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that explores the fascinating intersection of faith, history, science, and the persistent human search for answers to life's biggest questions. Thanks for watching.